Hey guys, Paul. So today I wanted to talk about low-tier Yu-Gi-Oh decks and how they're actually pretty scary these days. This is actually something that's kind of been happening for a while now, and I thought it's just an interesting conversation to have because it kind of encapsulates some other things like just, product design, game maturity, power creep, and I think it's overall a pretty cool thing. So what I mean by this is that obviously in any given Yu-Gi-Oh metagame, you've got your, top tier decks, your high tier stuff. Right now, that's a little bit up in the air because we have a new ban list, but like people are saying that's Drytrons. People are still, looking at a lot of the established top decks, the Invoked Shaddoll, the Tri-Brigade variants, things like that. There's a few questions about maybe whether like Sky Strikers or Salamangreats or something might, be up there with them too, but that's not exactly what I'm talking about. So normally you've got those, and then you've got, your rogue decks that are kind of in the lower tiers, are able to compete against the top tier decks. You could call them tier 2. I'm not going to get too much into the exact definitions here, but the thing that I've noticed in the past few years is just that the average, like, super sort of mid-level deck can just still put out so much, attack power. By attack power, I don't necessarily just mean strong monsters. I just mean like negations or just, their access to extenders, those sorts of things. I guess like an interesting story that I had, it was maybe a year and a half ago now, actually at the last regional that I got to go to before the whole COVID thing happened. We went to this regional or whatever, a few of us, and it was a pretty fun regional. Calvin specifically was there, along with others, but it was Calvin, and he was playing Salamangreats, which, at the time was one of the really good decks, and he'd prepared a bunch for, whatever the top tier deck at the time was. Spirals, I think, was pretty big, that sort of thing. Well, anyways, yeah, he prepared a lot for those decks, and he went to the event, and I think played against, like, a 6 Samurai deck. This was like right after the release of that Link monster that they got, like Search's Gateway. And it did some crazy wild loop that like Trishulas you like 5 times or something and takes your hand. And that's like what it does. If they get hit by Droll and Lockbird, obviously that gets shut down. If they get hit by just honestly like an Effect Veiler or an Ash Blossom on a Link monster just the right time, it gets shut down and the deck usually kind of just crumbles. But they didn't. And he got hand looped for 5, and that's like what happened maybe in the first game. In the second game, maybe he won or lost, or I don't know. But in the third game, it happened again. So he loses to this crazy 6 Samurai deck out of nowhere. Now, this actually happened a couple times that day. He actually played against another 6 Samurai player who was playing a very similar variant and did the same crazy thing. And it just kind of got me to thinking, like, man, I think 6 Samurai is not on anybody's tier list, right? But the fact of the matter is, with the right hand, and in the absence of hand traps from your opponent, in the absence of maybe a Nibiru or some, a Droll and Lockbird, Dimension Shifter or something like that these days, this deck can go nuts. It can like literally loop your hand. And, the same, and just speaking of hand loops, I know like say the Mermail deck can like loop your hand, the little water Mermail hybrid thing. But no one's calling that, like a top tier deck or even like a rogue deck. It's not on anybody's radar, but these decks exist that can do this. And then there's like so many other examples of decks that are kind of in the same boat in a different way, like Blue Eyes Chaos Max, for instance. This is, like obviously super gimmicky card in Blue Eyes that's, kind of an anime deck, or at least that's what people would tell you, right? Like, oh, it's just a gimmick. Oh, it sucks. But the thing is, I've seen people at Yu-Gi-Oh events, like, regionals and stuff like that, and YCS events, get beaten by a Blue Eyes Chaos Max. Whichever one it is, it's either Blue Eyes Chaos Dragon or Chaos Max Dragon. One of them that does like the double piercing, and like I've seen people like just search it with what is the card? Melody Awakening Dragon, and like summon it with, whatever ARA, Advanced Ritual Art, whatever it happens. They summon it and they like Book of Eclipse you or something, and just boom, and they kill you in 1 turn. Again, it's another one of those decks that the right hand traps will completely cut it off, or just the right kind of well-placed counterplay will. But the fact of the matter is, these decks exist and they're extremely powerful. And it seems like just even without those, I guess maybe you might call them more gimmicky or cheesy types of wins, even just if you kind of normalize it a bit, any deck can make Apollousa. Any deck can make Borreload Savage Dragon. for a long time, a lot of decks were able to make VFD. And of course, there's like plenty of other, just of the like Omni-Negate type monsters, to the point where the average low tier deck is like, would probably wipe the floor with like a top tier deck from just 5 or 6 years ago. And it's just crazy because it means like you have to be completely on your guard when you play at regionals or even at locals really, but like regionals and YCS events, which are coming back soon. That's pretty cool. But yeah, you have to really be on your guard because those are oftentimes the decks that can just surprise you and like steal a win, like just pull the rug right under you. Because like you prepare for the meta, but people oftentimes forget the low tier decks right now are like replicating a lot of what the meta does, perhaps just a little less consistently, or perhaps with a bit, more susceptibility to hand traps, but they're still able to do it. And I think it's also, so power creep is like definitely one of the big things that is responsible for that, right? But there's also just the fact that like Yu-Gi-Oh players now, sorry, I dropped my phone. Yu-Gi-Oh players now, in addition to power creep, we now like just lab decks and we lab combos so hard. People, like the moment a new archetype gets announced or a moment the support comes from some old archetype, like people are ready to just like dig in and find like the craziest first turn board that deck can make now. And so many decks now can do that. Like I can just name so many, like Harpy Ladies, right? That's a deck that can do this some more barrier statue thing. It can kill you with Utopia double. It can just make negate if it wants to. And then like another deck that I've seen was like Magical Musketeers. That's actually a deck that I played, and I think that same regional where like they've got that Link 1 monster that can randomly search them like a bunch of Magical Musketeer monsters and just summon them all from the deck, or search like 4 or 5 spells and traps in their hand. And if you don't know what's going on, or you don't know like, just how to stop this stuff, or you don't have the hand trap, low tier decks these days can completely just swamp you. And I think that's actually really cool. So there's obviously ups and downs depending on who you ask. I think like some very competitive types might not really like this. A lot of people prefer a format that's a little bit more, has more known threats. You kind of want to know like the 2 or 3 decks you need to prepare for, how to best prepare for them, maybe know about the one stray threat, like a Mystic Mind thing, like, maybe having a Cosmic Cyclone in your side deck, Twin Twisters, whatever, for that. And that's kind of it, right? Like that is, if you're a competitor, you want to only really have to prepare for maybe a few things, and that way you can focus all your efforts onto that. But if you're kind of more of, I guess, I don't know, it's a casual player, but I mean, just in any of the other camps, this is actually exciting. It makes formats more unpredictable and more diverse, and most people tend to say that that's a good thing. I'm not really taking a side here, but I think that it's nice to see. Like, obviously, when I'm preparing for events, I prefer to not have to, worry about, random Joe's weird deck where I have to read every single card as it's happening and the timer's ticking in the round and I'm like getting FTK'd by cards I've never seen before. It can kind of suck. I mean, it sounds fun and exciting from a distance, but when you're sitting there at the table and it's happening to you and you're getting hand looped or something, yeah, that does suck. But, it is cool to know that the power level of the low tier is so much higher now, and the amount of people who are dedicated to figuring these decks out is also much higher. So it's just an interesting thing. Let's see, is there anything else I had to say about it? I mean, I guess just it maybe sometimes makes me worry about, like the generic extra deck monster problem that everybody sort of complains about, how every deck has access to access code talker. That was not a planned pun. And Apollosa and Borreload Savage. Like sometimes maybe it seems like these cards are so generic, like any deck can use them and like win. But it depends. Like some people say that those cards are only problematic because the top tier decks use them, and it's like the low tier decks can use them, and it's interesting. Anyways, I guess I've gone on long enough with this. The main thing is that low tier decks are getting a lot better, and they are definitely a threat. I think as events return, this will become it's kind of just another new normal, although I really think it's been like this for years. What do you guys think about it? Do you like the idea that, the average low tier deck these days is so much of a threat compared to, maybe 5 years ago when the low tier decks seemed like they were just complete trash almost compared to the best things? Or do you find it maybe a little bit more stressful? I don't know. I'd like to hear your thoughts, so let me know down in the comments. I'll see you guys in the next one. Pass turn.